and Mr. Dan Ellsberg, a former US Marine and military analyst who released the top secret Pentagon papers concerning US decision-making in Vietnam to the New York Times and other major media in 1971. He faced 12 felony counts and life in prison before the dismissal of his case. He was awarded the 2006 Right Livelihood Award, known as the Alternative Nobel Peace Prize, in Stockholm, Sweden, for putting peace and truth first at considerable personal risk and dedicating his life to inspiring others to follow this example. Since the end of the Vietnam War, Daniel Ellsberg has been a lecturer, writer, and activist on the dangers of wrongful US interventions and the urgent need for patriotic whistleblowing. He is now a member of the Bradley Manning Support Network Advisory Board. Welcome, everyone. Thank you.
I was very impressed by each of the statements I've heard here, including Tom Drake's. I've long been impressed by all of these people. I particularly, I like their statements very much, and I've been thinking about them. The one I just heard is one I've virtually never heard from anyone. I've certainly shared that thought, as did, I know, Ray McGovern, for example, and probably Ann Wright, that there were times, and it's certainly true in my case, when I could have told, possibly to much greater effect than later, truth about what the government was doing, and I didn't do it. I didn't think of doing it. And I'm very struck to hear you acknowledge that. It's courageous in itself to do that. Courageous because it risks embarrassment. And the idea of risking embarrassment is what keeps people from doing civil disobedience, even in the smallest way often, and of doing what they should, embarrassment with their friends. Now, there are some people who seem almost proof against that, that really do awe me in this very audience. Let me say that for a long time, 40 years I could say, my Quaker friends have a slogan that has made me a little uneasy, which is their goal is speaking truth to power. And that always means to me, well, that's what I did as an official, you know, that was my job, and that's what Ray McGovern did, that's what Ann Wright did, that's what you did. I'm sure you felt you were telling the truth to your superiors. And it took me a long time, longer than it took Bradley Manning, which impresses me very much, to realize two things. A, that it didn't have any effect, telling it only to the people in power, keeping it inside the government, which is the price of having access to all this stuff, the implicit and explicit agreement that you will not tell it whatever it involves to anyone outside the branch that might embarrass the government. And the second thing is, as I say, first, it doesn't have any effect, and second, because, as Noam Chomsky says, power knows the truth. They know what I was telling them, and it hadn't affected them when they heard it from anybody else. So for a long time, it's felt to me that it's got to do something with that slogan. One thing is telling the truth of power to people who have been denied it, you know, to others, giving them power outside to countervail that government power. And then there's a particular thing of speaking truth to power in public, right in front of everyone. And we have the world champion of that, I dare to say here today, Medea Benjamin, and I saw her, who's done this all over the world, from Tahrir Square and everywhere, and at the National Defense University, when I saw her speaking truth to power to the president, I was so awed that I knew her even. She's a wonderful American and a patriot. And of course, I've heard both Ann Wright and Ray McGovern do much the same. Ray to Rumsfeld and Hillary Clinton, right? Both get escorted out. And when the president, that's a different way of doing it. And it's not in this country yet civil disobedience to do that. It's not breaking the law, although you can get your arms twisted and hauled out of the room very fast for doing it, as you all know, against the law. But the possibility of embarrassment, you know, and sticking your face out in front. When the President Obama said, very graciously, let her talk, you know, of course, I don't agree with what she says, it made me think now, first of all, I don't believe that. It's like everything else she says. Which part of what she said didn't he agree with? That there were people on hunger strike protesting years without charges in Guantanamo, he didn't agree with that. That he could, as President, Commander-in-Chief, get them out of there in a day by signing a paper, he didn't agree with that. No, he knows better than that. He knows that. But the people who heard that on television didn't know it, and they heard it thanks to her. And Jody Powell founded Code Think with her, and got arrested with both of them many times. So, true here, obviously, the people at the table. Yesterday I said that the large gathering yesterday was, for me, an extended family gathering. I didn't know a lot of the people. I know a rather significant fraction of the people here. This is a real family gathering for me. But on the issue of telling truth, the question is raised, I think, by Michael. And we heard it so often, and I've asked it so often. Why is Obama doing this? Why more prosecutions than George W. Bush or all presidents put together? For instance, here's what makes that question a little tighter, right? You can say it's after 9/11. He's got an environment that makes it more possible for him to do that, to crank down, make it look like national security. It's generally a more reactionary court, but that was true under George W. Bush, pretty much, and the courts in general. So why didn't Bush push it the way Obama is? And I thought of an answer just yesterday in the course of hearing myself be interviewed by one of the foreign press, which were well represented yesterday. The American press was represented by Fox News only. And I must say, I had the unique opportunity for me of saying something nice to Fox News, to congratulating him on something. I said I give credit to the head of Fox News for having recognized that Obama and Holder's charges that he had overseen against James Rosen of Fox News for possibly aiding and abetting, being co-conspirator for doing his job of getting classified information, was a violation of the Constitution and against the First Amendment. And Fox News has awakened to that at this point, and maybe some of the rest of the press will at this point. There may be a little turning point on that. Actually, there has been, over the last few years, a change in the attitude toward the word whistleblower in this country. And one of the signs of that is that that the government is arguing that Bradley Manning is not a whistleblower. And all of his critics and his opponents are saying he's no whistleblower, and I have gotten more praise than I have in 20 or 30 years because Dan Ellsberg is a whistleblower. Good. That was never thought of as putting me up on a good pedestal before. And Bradley Manning is not a whistleblower, which is absurd. But it does recognize that whistleblowing has somehow come of age as being the right thing to do under many circumstances. I was mentioned to several of the German television interviewed me yesterday and one today. I was given a whistleblower award a few years ago, about 5 years ago in Germany, by the Federation of German Scientists and the Federation of German Judges. And just before I was to go on to be introduced by the head judge of their administrative Supreme Court with a bunch of other judges behind the stage, I asked him, by the way, what is the German word for whistleblower? And they all agreed, said, there is no German word for whistleblower. That's why it's a whistleblower award. And so my first reaction was, how lucky you are to live in a country that doesn't need a word for whistleblower. But then I said, well, what's the best word, the closest you can come to? So he quickly said, and the other judges agreed, traitor. Traitor. So I said, is there perhaps any other word that you could come up with? And so they thought, they said, Petzer, which means, I was told, snitch, tattletale, teacher's pet, informer, basically. As a matter of fact, I asked a French interviewer just last week who was interviewing me what the French word is. Collaborator, informant, collaborator with the Nazis, informant, to the police and so forth. Well, I said to the Germans, that's pretty much the associations it has in my country, in English too. But that is changed a little bit. We're beginning to get a sense of why we need whistleblowers and what they do for us. To mention one benefit, for example, that I think not everybody recognizes with Bradley Manning. The Gay Parade Committee in San Francisco actually accused him of putting American troops in harm's way. And since American troops have always included gays, and now some of them are telling the truth about that, like Dan Choi, some of their gay people didn't want Bradley Manning named as a Grand Marshal in the gay parade that's coming up, which I was gonna represent him. I was looking forward to it. And so they said, put people in harm's way. The fact is, of course, not one person has been shown to have been harmed by what he did, either true or otherwise. On the other hand, tens of thousands of American troops, men and women, would be in harm's way in Iraq right now, if it were not for Bradley Manning and WikiLeaks. The fact is, I'm saying that in a very specific sense. As a matter of fact, the German interviewer here just now said, well, gee, what makes you say that? And precisely this, that one of the very many state cables of the hundreds of thousands that were put out revealed that the State Department was aware of an American atrocity, a serious one, by the way. I think there were 10 or 11 women and children, actually, with their hands bound behind their backs, shot in the head by American troops. And then they called in an airstrike to cover up how they'd been killed. Now, the Iraqis knew very well that the airstrike had not handcuffed them and was aware of the atrocity here, but the Americans had denied it. State cable, one of these thousands, said, which was revealed by WikiLeaks, said that we not only knew of that, but it had not been investigated and, of course, had not been prosecuted. That revelation specifically in the Iraqi press led Iraqi opposition and Maliki's own party to demand that no Americans could stay in the country on the risk of committing atrocities, which was a daily occurrence, with immunity from Iraqi prosecution, since Americans would not prosecute atrocities they were aware of. Very straightforward reaction. Well, Obama was negotiating to keep at least 10,000 and maybe much more than that in Iraq beyond the deadline that George Bush had negotiated, the end of the year. He negotiated that up until the last minute, but he had to demand immunity. He couldn't risk accusations of the kind of atrocities we saw on the video Bradley Manning put out. He couldn't risk Iraqi prosecution. He couldn't do it without immunity. Maliki couldn't let them stay with immunity. So they all had to leave. Many of them would have died by this time, if this time. And that's what I told the Gay Parade Committee. So, final point, if Bradley Manning had asked me what he asked Adrian Ramo, what would you do if you'd seen hundreds of, seen horrible things, terrible things, crimes, and you had free run of all of it? And if he'd asked me whether he should put out the video, I would, say, of course, absolutely, it should be out, should have been out long before, worth great personal risk to get it out. If he'd asked me, should I put out the entire Afghan war logs, or the entire Iraqi war logs, thousands and thousands of pages, which he obviously could not have read altogether, or the 260,000 state cables that he hadn't read, I'm pretty sure I would have told him, no, I didn't put out stuff that I hadn't read, and I wouldn't put out stuff classified that I hadn't read. I was wrong. 3 years have passed. We have 3 years of experience to see what came of his doing exactly what he did do, which was to put that out to WikiLeaks, let WikiLeaks put it out to a consortium of papers, international, which was crucial, who used their editorial staffs and their judgment and their years of experience to select out. Any one paper, would the New York Times have printed the Tunis cables? I don't think so. Ben Ali would still be the dictator of Tunis if he hadn't sent those out. Would there be the evidence of hundreds, even 1,000 instances in any one hand dozen of things that he'd read that showed how many times we had handed over prisoners to be tortured, an illegal act, and then ordered that that not be investigated, another illegal act. No. No one harmed as it stroked out, so the risks, which may not have been zero, were obviously nowhere in the level of the risks that people imagined. And on the other hand, enormous benefits that could not have been seen. If somebody asked me that advice tomorrow, I'd give them different advice than I would have 3 years ago. So that's why I think that this man is not only a hero of mine, but I hope that he knows that he's a hero to very many people in the world, not only in this country.
Thank you so much. I just realized I haven't had the chance to introduce myself at the beginning, which is very shameful. My name is Farah Mohsen, and I'm an organizer with the Bradley Manning Support Network. And I'm also originally from Iraq. That's worth noting. I really want to thank our panelists for their very wonderful presentations and in-depth accounts on whistleblowing and its impact on our lives as citizens, its impact on democracy and on journalism, of course, and how it all relates to the case of Bradley Manning. I would like to start a few questions for our panelists, and then after that we'll start a portion of Q&A from our audience. So my first question for Jesselyn, you mentioned that there are many human rights activists or journalists present at the Bradley Manning trials. What do you say? Why is the reason? Why is that?
I think, as with a lot of the whistleblower defendants, by labeling someone an enemy of the state or charging them with espionage, that is the most serious charge that can be leveled against an American. And once they lay that charge on you, you become radioactive, even to the groups that would normally help you, like civil liberties groups, First Amendment groups, whistleblower groups, good government and open government groups. And I saw that happen with Tom Drake, John Kiriakou, Peter Van Buren. Everybody was hands off, and I think that's a deliberate attempt by charging people under the Espionage Act when there is a multitude of other laws that can be used to charge for the mishandling of classified or secret information.
Mr. Daniel, I have a question for you. What do you say to those who accuse Bradley Manning of being a traitor? I know you touched on that, but we keep hearing people accusing Bradley of being a traitor, and he is the enemy and he deserves where he's at in prison.
I'll tell you, I heard that word addressed to me a lot 40 years ago. It's very, very, very unpleasant, especially for someone who thinks of himself as a patriot in particular, and who had lived the kind of life I did, which up till that time was a very conventional Cold Warrior patriot, grew up during World War II. And it's, to some degree, you get used to anything if you hear it enough. I'm not sure you ever get used, really, to being called a traitor. However, from the very beginning, I did reflect. It was clear to me that a lot of Americans did not appreciate the country they were living in, or the nature of the government they are living in, which we happen to live in a country up till now, and it's changing rapidly, more than we've seen together, in which it can't be treason to tell the truth to the public. It is not. That's not treason. In the eyes of very many people, to wash the dirty linen in public of any group you're involved in, whether it's any social group, certainly a family, the family secrets, whatever, certainly a corporation, certainly not just the government as a whole, but an agency, a particular team, is regarded by the others as embarrassing to them, as a treason to them, as breaking your perhaps promise not to do it, and is regarded, they use the word treason very, very loosely. One reason that, by the way, when I say that's not treason legally in this country. And by the way, even Bradley Manning has not, people think he's been charged with treason. He has not been charged with treason. And I was not charged with treason, although the President, Nixon, and Agnew both used that word informally about me, called me a traitor. They both, it so happens, left office under something of a cloud, a criminal cloud. But at the time they said it, a lot of people believed it. The fact is, treason is the one crime that is defined in the Constitution. It's the one criminal code that's defined in the Constitution so that it can't be changed or broadened except by an amendment. And the reason that a very narrow definition is given in the Constitution, I'll tell you what it is. It's making war against the United States or, comma, adhering to its enemies, comma, giving them aid and comfort. Now, nobody wanted to claim that I'd adhered to the Viet Cong or to the Russia or China. Nobody will claim that that Bradley Manning adheres to the Taliban or wish them well and wished his country harm. They aren't going to charge that. They'll just let it be thought that that's what he's being charged with. They use the phrase aid and comfort to the enemy without any element of intent, without adhering, without any. It's a very broad charge that could apply to anybody here or elsewhere who tells truths that are going to give pain to our government because it exposes them to crimes or lies or infections or whatnot. And that may indeed have the side effect of giving comfort to an enemy by embarrassing the United States. But the problem is, by the way, I know I'm going on here, but I want to, in this context, answer a question that I raised earlier and I didn't answer. Why is perhaps Obama doing this in the way of using techniques to stop whistleblowing that even his predecessors didn't use? And I think it's because he's carrying out policies, some the same as before, some even worse in some respects, that are shameful, criminal, deceptive, aggressive, and he has constituents that would not like that. It would embarrass him with the people who voted for Democrat Barack Obama. And so it's especially urgent for him to keep secret the very policies that he inherited from George Bush, whose constituents thought these were dandy in general, and no problem. It wasn't, this is just a conjecture, but it wasn't as important for him to keep them secret. He did what he could to keep them secret, but he could afford to let it be known because he got votes for it. Whereas Obama risks votes when these truths come out. So finally, I'm saying I think that people should realize that this is not a country where telling the truth about the government is treason. People are mistaken when they say that. They don't know how lucky they are to live in a country that officially at least rejects that standard. And what Obama should do is to stop carrying out policies that are so shameful, criminal, and lying that they require this level of secrecy to keep them from his own people and his own voters.
Shortly after 9/11, I blew the whistle in the case of the American Taliban John Walker Lindh, and unnamed anonymous government officials called me a traitor, a turncoat, and a terrorist sympathizer in the New York Times. And that was done to alienate me from all my neighbors and all my friends. Again, please, if you do see trashy movies like We Steal Secrets, remember that smearing the messenger like Bradley Manning or Julian Assange, rather than listening to the message, is what the government wants you to do and what some filmmakers want you to do. Thank you.
One thing I say, I got asked that question so often 40 years ago on the air, that I didn't like to give the same answer all the time, and I would think of different things to say. And my favorite answer, which was a guy who was very openly conservative and hostile to me, and by his tone, same question as the other. What does it feel like to be regarded as a traitor by so many Americans? Feel like? And I said, well, this country was founded by traitors. Every signer of the Declaration of Independence. when they pledged their lives and their sacred honor, they knew that they were liable to be hanged for treason, and some of them were on the Declaration of Independence. And it was very, I really enjoyed seeing his eyes roll around as he tried to get on top of that one.
Thank you very much. Before we proceed with our questions, and there are plenty, so thank you very much for participating, I would like to introduce somebody that I had the honor and pleasure to meet in person after knowing so much about through reading about him. Ethan McCord is here with us tonight. And Ethan, as some of you may know or not know, he's the soldier who helped save the lives of the 2 Iraqi young women, young girls who were at the van that were, at the collateral murder video. And Ethan would like to share a few words with us here tonight. So,
thank you. As I said, my name is Ethan McCord, and I was a soldier who can be seen in collateral murder who was carrying the children from the van. That was one incident of many incidents just like that in Iraq. It was not a one-off incident. Bradley Manning, to me, I didn't know Bradley Manning whatsoever, and in fact, I got a... put me up right there. I got a friend request from him on Facebook and didn't think anything of it right after the video was released. And in fact, I didn't know that there was a video to begin with. I was just doing the right thing. And I got berated by all the other soldiers that I was around for doing that. And I was just doing what a father should do, and hoping that another man would do if put in the same position that I was. And well, when I heard the name Bradley Manning come across the news, I knew that name sounds familiar, and I pulled it up on my Facebook, and I was like, "What's going on here?" And immediately I felt this connection with Bradley Manning, like we had seen the same things, felt the same things, and we were brothers. And I could not support him. Bradley Manning is a hero, and everybody's talking about traitor, the word traitor, and I get called a traitor by the people in my unit, and I'm proud to be a traitor if that's what a traitor is. I will do anything in my power to support Bradley Manning until he's released, and damn it, he's going to be released. I'm telling you, he will. It may not be tomorrow, but time will tell. He will be released. You have to forgive me, I'm not the greatest speaker in the world. I was a soldier for a long time, so. What everybody's doing, supporting Bradley out here, the amount of people who were out there marching yesterday is just phenomenal. It's I live in Kansas, and there's nobody in Kansas, but amazingly enough, we got a big enough group of supporters together in Kansas who, when Bradley Manning was in Leavenworth, they were out there all the time and putting the pressure on. So, and that's what's going to change this, is the pressure towards the media, towards the military, towards President Obama to do the right thing, because Bradley Manning did the right thing, and we owe it to him to stand behind him. So.
And for some reason, if you don't know who this amazing man is, you can see his story in Jim Spion's Incident in New Baghdad, which was nominated for an Oscar and won the Tribeca Film Festival. Jim Spione is now doing a documentary on myself, Tom Drake, Peter Van Buren, and John Kiriakou called Silenced. So while there may be no truth today, there will always be history. And all of the